I'd never known another woman of color or another woman without color to have performed in a pregnancy the way Meghan did. Anything to do with those children and how they came into existence would have possibly racial implications, when of course it's nothing to do with that at all.
Something happened. Even the most generous observer would have to admit it. The way Meghan's pregnancies played out in public, the announcements, the appearances, the carefully controlled silences, followed no pattern that people with serious royal experience had ever seen before. Not once, but twice. And the question that has been quietly building weight ever since, the one that serious people with serious credentials have been whispering about in private for years, is finally being asked out loud by someone whose reputation demands it be taken seriously. Lady Colin Campbell, royal biographer, insider, and one of the sharpest minds in this space, has spoken. What she said about Archie and Lilibet, what she believes the palace knows, and why she thinks the full truth hasn't come out yet, completely flips this story on its head. Let's get into exactly what Lady C said, because every single word matters here. She did not make a flat-out claim. She did not state as fact something unproven. What she did in the careful, legally precise language her position demands was name the irregularities.
Meghan's performance throughout her pregnancy was very bizarre, and whatever went on was definitely not what normally goes on, whether it was Meghan playing with the size of her bum or something else. There is a story there to come out, and I feel sorry for the royal family because they have been put in a no-win situation.
She called the way Meghan's pregnancies were handled, in her own word, bizarre. She made clear that whatever happened was definitely not normal, and she said, plainly and calmly, with zero drama, that there is a story there to come out. 4 short sentences, each one chosen with extraordinary care. Together, coming from a woman of Lady C's knowledge and reach, they carry serious weight. This is not someone guessing from the sidelines. Lady C has spent decades building relationships at the very heart of the British royal world, built on trust, discretion, and a sharp understanding of what can be said when.
It's a malicious and destructive mode of behavior that she has thought would put the royal family in a no-win situation. But if the royal family would simply have a bit of gumption, they would find that they could put her in her place and in a no-win situation. But they're obviously either not resourceful enough, not imaginative enough, not experienced enough, and not brave enough. But it would take great courage, because unless it were properly handled, it could very...
And how? Her books have repeatedly contained information that was first denied, then later confirmed. Her reads on people and situations have proven more accurate, time and again, than the polished official versions fed to the public. She was ahead of the staff departure story. She was ahead of the family estrangement story. She was ahead of the financial story. She spotted patterns that others brushed off as mere criticism when they were actually insider intelligence, and she has been proven right quietly and repeatedly by events. When Lady C says there is a story to come out, she is not throwing darts in the dark. She is conveying in the only language currently available to her what she has been told by people who actually know. So what specific irregularities is she pointing to? The bump, for starters. Lady C's description of it is sharp and unforgettable. She says it had more ups and downs than Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton's marriage, but beneath the wit is a serious point. Across dozens of public appearances during Meghan's first pregnancy, experienced observers noticed changes in the appearance of the baby bump that simply could not be explained by clothing alone. Pregnancy presents in specific ways. It follows specific patterns. What was being observed did not consistently match those patterns, and the people raising these flags were not random voices online.
I feel sorry for the royal family because they have been put in a no-win situation. Would be injurious to the royal family. Meghan knows if the royal family would simply have a bit of gumption, they would find that they could put her in her place. If you put things through corporations and charities, you save on tax. So, and Meghan's very sophisticated. If ever she decided that she wanted to cease being a scrubber, she could become a laundress.
They included individuals with direct professional expertise in exactly this area. Then came the actual arrival of Archie, and this is where the questions stop being merely curious and start getting genuinely pointed. Meghan's American publicist had made a very specific, very public promise. The media would be notified the moment Meghan went into labor. That notification never came. When information finally did arrive, the timeline it presented struck those with real experience in royal announcements as seriously inconsistent with what was simultaneously being described as the sequence of events. Credentialed journalists at mainstream publications were already asking questions at the time. And here is the part that really makes you stop. Buckingham Palace itself, Lady C now points out, was relying entirely on Harry and Meghan for its information. Which means that if Harry and Meghan chose to feed the palace a misleading account, the palace would have been unknowingly passing that misleading account straight to the world. That is not a small detail. That is a mechanism, a real, functioning mechanism by which a false story could have been built and maintained at the highest institutional level. Then came Lilibet Diana, 2 years later in California, under circumstances that were, if anything, even more unclear.
Of course, we both have to be very careful how I would answer that. Let me put it this way. Meghan's performance throughout her pregnancy was very bizarre. And whatever went on was definitely not what normally goes on. Whether it was Meghan padding and Meghan playing with the size of her bum or something else. There is a story there to come out.
Straight from Harry and Meghan's own mouths came a description that left medical professionals scratching their heads, a home birth at a hospital, an announcement made entirely on the family's own schedule with zero independent verification of any key detail. Lady C admits she is less across the specifics of Lilibet's arrival given the distance, but she is crystal clear that the questions surrounding both arrivals deserve serious, honest engagement. And she is equally clear that they have never received it. Now here is where this stops being royal gossip and becomes something far more calculated. Because the reason these questions have gone unanswered, the reason the palace has not pushed, not pressed, not pursued the truth with the diligence that the arrival of 2 children in the line of succession would normally demand is not, Lady C believes, incompetence. It is something far more uncomfortable than incompetence.
My accounting genius said the interest that they earned for the year was on $222,000. That's the entire amount that they had permanently for the year in their investment account. They don't have a great deal of money. They have a massive mortgage on their house. They have massive expenses. And with each year, it's going to be diminishing returns.
Harry was so stupid to move away because obviously it means the jurisdiction is in California, which is bad for him. So it's virtually impossible for him to come back. He's trapped. Although this rumour that he wants to find a way back.
I don't believe a thing that comes out of Harry and Meghan's mouth.
It is a calculated paralysis, deliberately engineered by someone who understood from day one exactly how this institution operates and exactly what it would and would not be willing to risk. From her very first weeks as Harry's public partner, Meghan built her public identity around one specific and powerful claim that any scrutiny directed at her is racially motivated. That criticism of her is never really about her conduct, her choices, or her character, that it is always at its root about who she is. This framing has been deployed with stunning consistency and skill in the Oprah interview, in the Netflix series, in Spare, in every single media appearance where her treatment by the royal family came up. And it has worked. Not because it is true, Lady C is absolutely clear that the questions around the pregnancies have nothing whatsoever to do with Meghan's heritage, but because it is effective. Because it plants a tripwire that any institution built on dignity and restraint will be extremely reluctant to step anywhere near. Think about what that means in practice. If the royal family were to formally engage with the questions surrounding the arrivals of Archie and Lilibet, if they were to push for answers, launch an independent review, or publicly challenge the account they were handed, they would instantly face accusations of doing so because of Meghan's background.
Meghan knows would be injurious to the royal family. So, and this is also possibly why she has played things the way she's played them. It's a malicious and destructive mode of behavior, but it would take great courage, because unless it were properly handled, it could very adversely rebound upon them. I think Meghan is going to prove to be like Angelina Jolie. There are some women who will do anything to work over a man, and children are fair game, and they will use the children. I have little doubt that if there was a divorce, unless it was in Meghan's worldly interest, she would bend over backwards to be as nasty as possible. That's just her personality.
That accusation, however baseless, would be devastating. It would take over the news cycle overnight and hand Meghan exactly the ammunition she has always been after. Lady C calls this malicious, and she means that word precisely. This was not, in her reading, an accidental side effect of Meghan's public positioning. It was the whole point. The framing was not built primarily as a shield against criticism. It was built as a weapon against scrutiny, a way of making sure certain questions could never be asked by the one institution powerful enough to actually demand real answers. It is, as Lady C acknowledges with something close to reluctant admiration, extraordinarily sophisticated. But here is the flaw she identifies with equal clarity: it is not quite sophisticated enough. Because here is what appears not to have been fully calculated. The truth does not respect strategic architecture. It does not care how carefully a narrative has been constructed, how effective a tripwire has been set, or how many years a managed story has held together. Truth finds the gaps: a court document that surfaces something previously sealed, a source who finally runs out of patience, an account that contradicts another in a way that simply cannot be explained away.
In a best case scenario, if they were actually divorced and he moved back to England, he would see the children, presumably some of the time they'd be allowed to come to England, and the rest of the time he'd have to see them in California, unless of course she should marry some billionaire and waft off with him. Charles and William seem to have missed the point that being royal isn't only about what appears in the newspapers or on ITV at 10 or 98% of what they do goes unsung and is not reported in the mainstream media.
The specific financial pressure that forces a renegotiation nobody wanted to have in public, or simply time the accumulated weight of a story with too many moving parts, too many people who know pieces of it, too many inconsistencies that require constant, active management to keep from unraveling in the wrong direction. Lady C does not know exactly when or how the full story of Archie and Lilibet's arrivals will come out, but she is confident with the quiet, specific confidence of someone who knows far more than she is currently able to say that it will, and when it does, the royal family will face a question of their own. Not the question of what happened by then, presumably, that will already be known, but the question of what they knew, when they knew it, and what they chose to do with that knowledge. Because Lady C's analysis raises something that has not been widely discussed, the very real possibility that certain members of the royal family are already aware, and have been aware for some time, that the official account of events does not tell the complete story. She suggests, with her trademark precision, that there are people within the family who are very aware that certain things about the Sussex narrative do not add up, not suspicious, not merely puzzled, aware, and that awareness, she implies, is itself part of the trap that has been set.
My understanding is that there are members of the family who are very aware of the fact that the marriage is problematic. The family is not in close touch with him now. Even those members of the family who were closer to him are less in touch with him now than they used to be. And many of them will have nothing to do with him whatsoever. I don't believe a thing that comes out of Harry and Meghan's mouth. I know the marriage is very volatile and very up and down, which it would be, because they're both pretty unstable and volatile individuals. I think they're both very toxic personalities. And two toxic personalities, when they're not fighting, everybody else will be fighting each other.
Because knowing something without being able to act on it, without being able to say what you suspect, without being able to chase the questions your own instincts are screaming at you to chase, is its own particular and deeply corrosive kind of helplessness. The question of whether the palace knew is not a simple one. The answer may be yes and no and not quite, and more than they have admitted, all at the same time. It is worth pausing here to be absolutely clear about what is and is not being said. No one acting in good faith is asserting, as established fact, a specific alternative account of how Archie and Lilibet came into the world. What is being said, what Lady C is saying, what a number of credentialed voices have said before her, is that the public account contains gaps, inconsistencies, and unexplained details that have never been satisfactorily addressed. The birth announcement timeline, the opacity surrounding a christening conducted without independent witnesses, the godparents who were never named, the bump that behaved in ways experienced observers found genuinely difficult to explain. Each element alone might be dismissed. Together, in the hands of someone with Lady C's knowledge and sources, they form a picture she does not find satisfactory.
The royal family, mindful of the fact that Meghan had played the colour card from the word go, and that anything to do with those children and how they came into existence, or the doubts as to how they came into existence, would have possibly racial implications. It's nothing to do with that at all.
No.
I mean, women of colour give birth every single day of the week without any irregularities.
This is not a slimmed down monarchy now. It's positively anorexic. And they need boots on the ground.
I think Beatrice and Eugenie should be named. They would be good at it. They want to do it. And I always thought it was an act of folly. And I've been saying now for many years.
Then consider what this means for Harry, because Harry is not a bystander in this story. He is supposedly at its very center. He is the father of record for both children. He walked away from his family, his country, his institutional identity, and his inheritance for Meghan, and the life they were going to build together in California. And now, he finds himself in a position Lady C describes without hesitation as trapped, not metaphorically, but legally and geographically. The jurisdiction for any custody arrangement involving Archie and Lilibet is California, American law, American courts, American judges, on terms set by a system where Meghan holds every structural advantage and Harry holds very few. He cannot return to Britain without potentially losing his relationship with his children. He cannot build any meaningful distance from a situation that is, by most credible accounts, making him deeply unhappy. He is 40 years old, living in a house with a mortgage his shrinking income must support, watching the plans that were supposed to carry this chapter of his life quietly fall apart, one by one. He is, as Lady C says plainly, stuck, and the trap has geography, law, time, and money all working against him at once. What does Harry actually know? What has he been told about the circumstances surrounding his children's arrivals? What does he genuinely believe?
The royal family would not be coming to Harry's rescue. They would not be funding a divorce to any extent. And they, at this point, wouldn't really care what Meghan tried to say or do, because Meghan has so discredited herself as a liar, a cheat, and a fraud. In their last accounts, the interest that they earned for the year was on $222,000. That's the entire amount that they had permanently for the year in their investment account. They had a maximum of $11 million, which they have been playing around with. With each year, it's going to be diminishing returns.
These are questions Lady C wisely declines to answer definitively, but they are far from idle questions. Because if Harry knows, or even suspects, something that contradicts the official account, his silence would make a very specific kind of sense. And if Harry does not know if he has been, as Lady C suggests is entirely possible, misled just as effectively as Buckingham Palace was misled then, his position is even more heartbreaking than it already appears. A man who gave up absolutely everything, who may not even fully understand what he gave it all up for. The financial picture adds yet another layer to all of this. Lady C's financial advisor has been going through the Archwell accounts with serious attention, and what those accounts reveal is not the picture of a thriving, confident, well-resourced charitable operation. The interest earned on investments in the most recent filing period tells a very specific story about the actual scale of resources available to the foundation on a day-to-day basis. The headline numbers, the millions that moved through the accounts in the early years, do not reflect the operational reality of where things stand right now. Moving money between corporate and charitable structures is a well-known technique for creating the appearance of financial health. And Meghan, Lady C acknowledges, is genuinely sophisticated in understanding how these structures work. But sophistication has limits, and the foundation that was supposed to be the cornerstone of the entire Sussex Independent project is, by Lady C's advisors' reading, approaching those limits fast, with income streams continuing to contract and no obvious replacement anywhere in sight. Why does this matter to the story of Archie and Lilibet?
I don't think it's positively volatile. With, say, it's not an Italian marriage with and then you hug and make up and it's all blood and it's not blood, it's all thunder, but no lightning to strike anybody. I think their marriage they're both very toxic personalities, and two toxic personalities, when they're not fighting, everybody else will be fighting each other. Zara is not a member of the royal family, which people just don't seem to get. Her mother is a member of the royal family. It's a patrilineal system, it's not a matrilineal system. Princess Margaret used to say, just because my children have a mother who's a princess doesn't make them royal. Beatrice and Eugenie should be named
Because financial pressure changes calculations. It changes what is sustainable and what is not. It changes the cost-benefit analysis of holding a particular public narrative together when that narrative is being pulled from multiple directions at once. The pregnancy questions have not gone away. The financial questions have not gone away. And the marriage, which Lady C describes as volatile in a very specific and draining sense, has not stabilized the way the carefully managed public image of unity might suggest. All thunder and no lightning, she says, tension without release, rather than the productive friction of two people genuinely committed to working things out. And the children at the center of all of this are getting older. Archie is 6, Lilibet is 4. They will not always be insulated by their age from what the world is saying, thinking, and writing about the circumstances of their lives. There will come a point sooner than anyone involved wants to admit when the questions that have surrounded them since before they could walk become questions they themselves will need answers to. Which brings us to what Lady C believes the palace should actually do. And here, her frustration is impossible to miss, even through the measured language she uses. The royal family has the tools, she argues. They have the standing. They have the evidence of irregularity already sitting in the public domain. What they lack, what has stopped them from taking any meaningful action for years, is the nerve. She does not soften it. She says it straight. They are not resourceful enough, not imaginative enough, not experienced enough in this particular kind of fight, and not brave enough. 4 charges, each one landing with the full weight of someone who genuinely expected better and has been repeatedly let down. The race framing is the specific obstacle she keeps coming back to. The royal family is deeply, almost paralyzingly aware that this tripwire has been set and that any move they make toward the truth risks setting it off. Lady C understands this. She does not wave it away as an imaginary risk. It is real, it is serious, and she acknowledges both fully. But she also argues with the conviction of someone who has thought carefully about how power actually operates, that the risk of continued silence is now greater than the risk of carefully, courageously, and properly handled action. The truth will come out regardless. The only question is whether the palace shapes the context in which it surfaces, or gets caught completely flat-footed when it arrives on someone else's terms. There is a version of this story that ends well for the royal family, a version where the truth emerges through channels the institution has, to some degree, already prepared for, where measured, legally sound engagement with the questions Lady C has raised has already laid the groundwork for a response that is dignified rather than panicked. A version where King Charles, who is not a naive man, and who has been watching the Sussex situation with the kind of attention that proximity and high stakes demand, has quietly made sure that when the moment comes, the institution is ready to handle it rather than simply react to it. That version requires exactly the kind of backbone Lady C is calling for. It requires someone, somewhere inside that institution, to decide that the managed silence that has been the default position for years is no longer good enough, that the cost of doing nothing now exceeds the cost of facing the truth head-on. Lady C believes that decision has not yet been made. She hopes, though, she frames that hope with the caution of someone who has been let down before, that it eventually will be, because the alternative is far less comfortable. The alternative is that the story breaks in a way the palace never prepared for, on terms set by someone else, through a mechanism nobody inside the institution saw coming. And in that version of events, the children who have been so carefully shielded from scrutiny find themselves at the center of a revelation that the adults responsible for their well-being had years to prepare for and chose not to. That is not a small thing. That is not a detail. For Archie and Lilibet, growing up in California inside a narrative that may not survive contact with the truth, it is everything. Lady Colin Campbell has been watching this story since before most people even understood what it was. She has been patient, she has been precise, and she has been, when the moment required it, courageous in ways that have genuinely cost her in reputation, in relationships, in the particular social friction that comes from saying out loud what others have chosen to only whisper. Today, she is telling us the moment is coming. The story is not finished. The questions have not been answered, and the children at the center of it all deserve, eventually, to know what the truth actually is. The palace knows more than it has said, the family knows more than it has acknowledged, and Lady C, with the trademark restraint of someone who understands precisely where the line falls between what can be said and what cannot, implies that she does too. And now the biggest question still hangs in the air. If Lady C really knows more than she is saying, then how deep does this story actually go? Because the more details that surface, the harder it becomes for anyone to ignore the strange circumstances surrounding Archie and Lilibet. Some royal watchers believe the palace stayed quiet on purpose, carefully stepping around certain stories before they could explode into global headlines. Others believe there is still a massive secret sitting behind closed doors, waiting for exactly the right moment to finally come out. And what is making people even more suspicious is how precisely every public appearance, every statement, and every photograph has been managed over the years. At this point, nothing feels accidental anymore. Every tiny detail gets picked apart online within minutes, and the reactions have only grown more intense as Lady C keeps dropping hints that leave people genuinely stunned. One minute it seems like the mystery might finally be settling, then suddenly another claim surfaces and throws everything into chaos all over again. And here is what really has social media on absolute fire right now. If the palace knew something significant this entire time, why stay silent? Was it about protecting the monarchy's image? Dodging another full-blown royal crisis? Or is the truth far more tangled and complicated than anyone has been willing to publicly admit? That is exactly the part keeping royal followers locked onto every interview, every report, and every new comment that manages to break through the noise. And the noise, let's be clear, is getting louder by the day. Think about the layers this story has built up over time. It did not start with Lady C. It started with small observations, things that individually seemed easy enough to dismiss, but together began forming a picture that serious, credentialed people could not simply walk away from. A bump that behaved unexpectedly, a birth announcement that did not arrive when it was promised, a timeline that did not quite line up, a christening behind closed doors, godparents whose identities were never confirmed to the public, a home birth described as happening at a hospital. Each one of those details, standing alone, might have been forgiven or forgotten, but they did not stand alone. They stacked, and as they stacked, the questions they generated became harder and harder to dismiss with a wave of the hand. What makes this moment genuinely different from everything that came before it is not just what Lady C is saying, it is who she is. It is the weight that comes attached to her name and her track record. This is not an anonymous online account. This is not a tabloid columnist fishing for clicks. This is a woman with decades of relationships inside the world that surrounds the British royal family. A woman whose previous assessments have been proven correct, quietly and repeatedly, long after the official versions collapsed under their own contradictions. When someone with that kind of standing says, "There is a story there to come out," that is not gossip, that is a signal. And people who understand how this world operates are reading that signal very carefully right now. Social media, of course, has taken everything and turned the volume up to maximum. Within hours of Lady C's comments circulating, the debate had split into distinct and passionate camps. On one side, the people who have been asking these questions for years, feeling vindicated, sharing clips and timestamps and side-by-side comparisons with the energy of people who had been waiting a long time for the conversation to finally reach respectable ground. On the other side, the people who believe the entire line of questioning is unfair, invasive, and motivated by something uglier than curiosity. And that tension, that fierce, unresolved, comment section destroying tension, is itself part of the story. Because it reflects exactly the dynamic Lady C identified at the heart of the palace's paralysis. The moment anyone engages seriously with these questions, the framing war begins. And the framing war is exhausting, reputationally dangerous, and most institutions choose to avoid it rather than fight it. But here is the thing about framing wars. They can only be sustained for so long before the underlying facts start doing their own talking, and the underlying facts in this case have not gone quiet. They have not faded. If anything, with every passing month, with every new financial filing, with every new interview Lady C gives, with every account that surfaces from people adjacent to the Sussex world, the picture gets a little sharper, the gaps get a little harder to explain, and the official story gets a little more difficult to hold together without visible effort. The financial dimension is something that does not get nearly enough attention in these conversations, and it absolutely should, because money changes everything. Money changes what is possible and what is not. Money changes what deals get made and what deals fall apart. Money changes the calculation of whether a particular narrative is worth the ongoing cost of maintaining it. And right now, by the most credible accounts available, the financial picture surrounding the Sussex operation is not the picture that was being projected to the world 2 or 3 years ago. The Archwell Foundation numbers tell a story that the headline figures were always designed to obscure. The early millions that generated so much coverage and so many glowing profiles represented movement money flowing in and out of structures in ways that looked impressive from a distance. But operational reality is a different thing entirely from headline figures. And the operational reality, as Lady C's financial advisor has been examining in considerable detail, is that the income streams that once gave the Sussex project its appearance of independence and momentum have been quietly contracting with nothing obvious on the horizon to replace them. Why does this connect to the questions about Archie and Lilibet? Because a narrative under financial pressure is a narrative under stress, and a narrative under stress develops cracks. And cracks, as anyone who has spent time around institutions and their secrets will tell you, are where the truth eventually finds its way through. The financial pressure does not cause the truth to emerge, but it removes some of the padding that kept it contained. It makes the ongoing cost of active narrative management harder to absorb. It changes the incentive structures for people who know things and have, until now, chosen to stay quiet. Then there is the marriage itself, which Lady C describes with the kind of precision that only comes from genuine sources rather than speculation. All thunder and no lightning, tension without resolution. A relationship that presents one face to the public and lives a very different reality behind the carefully managed exterior. That is not a stable foundation. That is not a situation that gets easier with time and financial pressure and mounting public scrutiny all operating simultaneously. And instability, in situations like this one, has a way of producing exactly the kind of unpredictable moments that no amount of strategic architecture can fully anticipate or contain. Meanwhile, Harry sits at the center of all of this in a position that becomes more difficult to look at clearly the longer you examine it. 40 years old, living in a house with a mortgage, watching the deals and partnerships and projects that were supposed to sustain this chapter of his life contract one by one. Legally and geographically bound to a jurisdiction that gives him very little structural advantage if the relationship that brought him there were to change in fundamental ways. Unable to return to Britain without potentially sacrificing his relationship with his children, unable to build meaningful distance from a situation that is, by every credible account, making him deeply and genuinely unhappy. And underneath all of that, the question of what he actually knows, what he has been told, what he believes about the circumstances that have defined the last several years of his life. Lady C does not answer this definitively, and she is right not to. But the question itself is devastating enough, because if he knows something and cannot say it, his silence is a particular kind of trap. And if he does not know if he has been as effectively misled as the palace appears to have been, then the picture is even more heartbreaking than it looks on the surface. What keeps people coming back to this story, what keeps the comment sections lit up and the view counts climbing and the debates refusing to cool down, is that it operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On one level, it is a royal story, the kind of insider drama that has fascinated people for generations. On another level, it is a story about power, about how institutions protect themselves, how narratives get constructed and maintained, and what happens when those narratives start to develop pressure points that cannot be managed away. And on yet another level, it is a deeply human story about two children growing up in California, inside a version of their own origins that may not be the complete picture. Archie and Lilibet are not abstractions. They are not pieces on a chessboard. They are 6 years old and 4 years old, growing up in a world that is already talking about them in ways they cannot yet understand. And the adults who are responsible for them, all of the adults, on every side of this, will eventually have to reckon with what they did and did not do with the time and the knowledge they had. Lady C has been patient. She has been precise. She has been courageous at moments when courage carried a real personal cost. And today she is saying, as clearly as her position allows her to say it, that the story is not over, that the questions are still live, that the people who know more than they have said are still out there, and that the moment of full emergence, whenever it comes, and however it arrives, will reshape this entire story in ways that the official versions simply cannot survive. The palace has a choice to make. They can shape the context in which the truth emerges, approaching it with dignity and preparation, and the kind of measured institutional courage that Lady C is calling for. Or they can wait and find themselves reacting to it on someone else's terms, caught without preparation, without narrative control, and without the moral high ground that comes from having chosen transparency before it was forced upon them. Either way, and this is the part that no amount of strategic silence can change, the story moves forward, the truth finds the gaps, the cracks widen, and the questions that have been quietly accumulating weight for years keep getting heavier. So now we want to hear from you, because this conversation is far too big to be one-sided. Do you think Lady C is pulling back the curtain on things the public was genuinely never supposed to question? Or do you believe the conversation surrounding Archie and Lilibet has stretched beyond what the available facts can actually support? Do you think the palace stayed quiet on purpose, carefully managing distance from certain stories before they could explode into something uncontrollable? Or is there an even bigger secret, still sitting behind closed doors somewhere, waiting for exactly the right moment to finally come out? And the question sitting above all the others, did the palace really know more than they ever admitted? And if they did, what does that silence say about the institution, about the people inside it, and about what they were and were not willing to do with what they knew? Drop everything you are thinking in the comments below. Every single comment gets read, and the conversation happening down there is every bit as intense as the story itself. If this had you locked in from start to finish, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to be part of this conversation. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what is coming next, because there is a lot more on the way, and you do not want to be the last one to know. See you in the next one.